James Lynch here from MiddleEasy. So happy to be talking to Laura Sanko, who's going to help us preview Saturday's UFC 271 card and talk about a bunch of other cool stuff. Laura, how are you today?
I'm doing great, as always, getting ready to head over to Houston tomorrow morning. So I'm excited, man. It's going to be a good card.
Yeah, and thanks for doing this. I know, again, you got a crazy schedule going forward. Let's jump right into this really awesome main event. Israel Adesanya, Robert Whittaker, the rematch. What are you expecting in this rematch with the fact that Whittaker has now won 3 straight fights since their first fight? What are you thinking as far as the rematch?
You know, it's interesting as I was doing my tape study, because I'm actually about to do a breakdown for my own channel here shortly. I'm expecting a really different fight, a very different fight, particularly for Robert Whittaker. You know, when you watch their first fight, and I'll say this, I love rematches because so much of analysis in the fight game is really educated guesswork, and it's nice to have a baseline where with your thoughts in terms of where you feel like the fight could go. So it's fun that we have this fight to go back and look at that didn't take place all that long ago, although enough time has passed where I think we are going to see some big changes. And I think the biggest thing that we're going to see, and it's not rocket science, is a big shift in the overall strategy from Robert Whittaker. You know, even you hear him talk about it, you know, in the lead up to this fight, about how emotional he got, and how could you not, right? Like, wasn't it like 70, almost 70,000 people? I might be getting that wrong, that number slightly wrong, but it was a record-breaking crowd, you know, in his home country. He's representing, he's going for the title. I think it's really difficult for people who haven't fought, and even I who have fought, I haven't fought even remotely close to that level. I think it's really difficult for us to comprehend the amount of pressure. So he got emotional, he got a bit in his head, and you know, when you watch that fight, it's pretty clear. I mean, he's just continuing to lunge forward at Adesanya, and that is exactly how Israel Adesanya fights best. Every fight you go back and watch where you see a signature performance from Israel Adesanya, it's because his opponent is being the aggressor. His opponent is the one closing the distance. It's the Yoel Romero fights where you see him slow down a little bit and have to play counter to the counter. And frankly, it can sometimes lead to a less exciting fight. But again, who are we to say what's exciting and what's not when the stakes are not only the belt, but millions of dollars and everything else involved. So I think we're going to see a much more calculated Robert Whittaker. And I think he's either going to play in his own counter range, which is also on the outside for, you know, a Whittaker's range, or I do think we might see him mix in the wrestling at the right moments. You know, in the Gastelum fight, we saw Robert start to use his wrestling really for, I'm not going to say the first time, he's shot before, but the first time somewhat consistently. And even then he wasn't using it that much in a fight. Robert Whittaker has phenomenal wrestling. I mean, he was selected to represent Australia in the Commonwealth Games back in 2018, I believe it was. Just didn't end up doing it. So he has an incredibly high level of freestyle wrestling. He just never uses it. Why he doesn't? That's a great question. Part of it is because he has had so much success with the striking. So why broke it? You know, why change it if it's not broken? So, but I think in the Israel Adesanya fight, when you look at how Jan Blachowicz beat Israel Adesanya, and then you couple in the fact that Robert Whittaker has never really truly tested his wrestling against Israel Adesanya, I think that we will see some of that start to enter the picture. Whether Whittaker can be as physical as Jan Blachowicz, I think is really the question that we're going to get answered. And my tendency is to think not, because Whittaker used to be a welterweight and Jan Blachowicz is a big, big Polish boy.
Yes.
Man.
Yeah, no, he certainly is. Not to look too far ahead here, but, you know, Adesanya's the favorite. I think a lot of people are picking him going into the rematch, not only because he won the first fight, but just the success he's had in the division. He hasn't lost at 185. We got to talk, though, about the implication for Whittaker. If he loses here, he's sort of in that Colby Covington, that spot where you've lost twice to the champion. Where would Whittaker go from here, do you think?
Man, that's a great question. I think you see this, I'm not going to say often, but you see this, right, where you've got 1A and 1B, and there's just really no getting around it. And Israel clearly answered the question of whether he's going to go up to 205 and stick around there. So I don't think that that's an option. I think it puts Robert Whittaker in a really tricky situation. But by the same token, you know, he's always going to be right there. So whether we end up getting a third fight eventually, if there's some sort of fallout, you just, it's really difficult to tell the future, but it would be a tricky situation. I certainly could see him fighting, someone like a Sean Strickland, or maybe, because we're all assuming that maybe the winner of the what's it called, the feature bout, the third one down.
Brunson and Cannonier, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That the winner there will be the next title challenger. So I don't know. I think a Whittaker Strickland fight could make a lot of sense.
There we go. A lot of options there. Co-main event. It wouldn't be a Houston card without Derrick Lewis on it. He is the co-main event. Going to be taking on Tai Tuivasa, who has really, turned things around. He had, I think, 3 straight losses. Now he's on a nice winning streak heading into this fight. Can he pull off the upset in this fight, do you think?
Oh, I definitely think he's capable of doing it. Derrick Lewis, I mean, it's not hard to figure out what Derrick Lewis's overall game plan is, and that's to land the power shot, right? What's interesting though when you watch him is he's got to be a tricky guy to fight, because he does this thing where he lulls, right? He's so plotty, really not putting much out there, and then he'll create these moments of high intensity, and sometimes he'll do it with something strange, like a skipping, flying roundhouse kick, which every time he kicks that high, I'm just amazed that he has dexterity in his legs for a guy who's built like that. He'll create this moment of high intensity. He did it in the Dawkins fight. And then you see Dawkins start to sense that, like, oh, he's coming for me, and didn't really know how to get out of range. It was the smaller octagon. It was in the apex, if I remember correctly. But Derrick does such a good job of creating that moment of panic, and then funneling guys against the cage and finding a way to land the power. He's more sophisticated sometimes, I think, than we really give him credit for. But on the flip side, Tai Tuivasa, I mean, I think we are really starting to see Tai start to think in fights in a strategic way. The IQ that he is starting to inject into his performances is really impressive, because you get the impression that he's just genuinely a guy who enjoys fighting. And I think that carried him so far in his career. And then he hit a certain echelon of fighter, JDS, and realize, oh man, like, I might actually have to be strategic out here and not just come out here and enjoy fighting. So I think coupled with that, he's no longer having fat camps. He's no longer only training to get back in shape, to get in there, and having fat camps and actually think about the technique and the strategy, and starting to put a ground game together. Oh, we haven't seen it much. I think it is developing. He is as well a much more sophisticated fighter than I think we give it credit for. And he's smart. If he's smart about this, he's going to take a little touch of Cyril Gahn and inject it into this performance, make Lewis miss, get him tired, maybe wear him out, push him up against the octagon a little bit. I think both of these guys, frankly, are going to be looking to cage wrestle quite a bit in this one. So I think whoever can force those stanzas and hold those positions longer are going to get an edge in this fight, and probably end up, taking it further. I know a lot of people would love to see them just go out there and swing. Maybe they'll do that. They're heavyweights after all, and I think both these guys just like to bang. But if you're really asking my opinion, I think we're going to see a more strategic performance from Tai, and then maybe a knockout later in the fight from one of them.
There we go. I think that's a safe bet. The other big fight on this card, and we referenced it there, Jared Cannonier, Derrick Brunson. This has got to be one of the closest fights on the card. I've seen different opinions each way. There's Blonde Brunson. He's been undefeated since then. There's Cannonier, who obviously can pack a punch. We saw that knockout a few fights ago over Jack Hermanson. What do you make of this matchup? Because like we both sort of agreed here, the winner will probably fight Israel Adesanya or Robert Whittaker in the main event.
Well, it's a fantastic matchup, and I always like it when you get true. I almost said the word prospect. They're not prospects, but you get true contenders in a position to jockey for the correct spot that they should be in. I think Derrick Brunson is on an incredible tear. I mean, don't mess with Blonde Brunson. No one should mess with Blonde Brunson. And Jared Cannonier, he's healthy. I think Jared's one of those guys that, as long as he's healthy and in the right frame of mind, he's got a really difficult skill set. He's got incredible power, incredible cardio in this division, and it's a close matchup in my mind. I appreciate that you're not asking me for a pick, because I wouldn't give you one regardless. But it really genuinely is a very closely matched fight in my mind.
Another fight that's kind of flying under the radar a little bit, and understandable, some of the names on this card, is the Roxanne Modeferri and Casey O'Neill fight. Of course, Roxanne, this will be her last fight in her very storied career. I mean, she's been around forever and competed, and I'm sure you know Roxanne quite well from the Invicta days. And she's fighting Casey O'Neill, who's sort of been thought as this, sort of up-and-comer, the sort of the new breed in the weight class. They tried this once with Macy Barber and Roxanne. How do you, what do you make of this fight coming up here on Saturday?
I love Roxanne Modeferri, and I think if you don't love Roxanne Modeferri on at least some level, whether it's as a person or as a fighter, then you're crazy. She is a true staple of women's MMA, and even if you don't think much of her fighting style, you have to give respect to a woman who is a true pioneer in the sport. I think people take for granted that she started fighting in 2003, which for women's MMA is absolutely wild to think where the sport was at that time, and that she was dedicating herself to a sport that really gave you nothing at that point in history. And she did for a very long time. I mean, she had a 10-year career before she even thought about making real money at doing this or having an actual profession out of it. So you have to give Roxanne respect. She always comes to win. She's very, having 45 fights gives you something that it's really difficult to get in 8 fights, even if you're undefeated, as Casey O'Neill is. I think the fight IQ, just the veteran durability that Roxanne Modeferri brings to the octagon is going to be really difficult to deal with. That being said, Casey O'Neill is the real deal. I've seen her fight. I've seen her skill set. And I think people are correct in their assessment that she is the new breed of female fighter. And it's going to be an interesting juxtaposition of generations of women's MMA. And, for that reason, I'm excited to watch it.
Is there a favorite Roxanne Modeferri story or memory that you've had from, seeing her compete or get to interact with her over the years?
When you mention her, basically it just brings a smile to my face, because she's always, that's what she brings to whatever situation, she's in, is just this happy, positive attitude. I can close my eyes and imagine many times interviewing her post-fight in Invicta, and she just has this sort of quirky, way of doing an interview that I always found really endearing. She's very proper and always over articulates her words. And I don't know, I'm very much gonna miss her as a person and as a fighter as well. And she's carved out her piece of women's MMA history, and I'm happy that she has.
Sticking with women's MMA, it was announced last week, and they did the media tour this week. Amanda Nunes, Julianna Pena going to be coaching season 30 of The Ultimate Fighter. How do you think that's going to translate on sort of the show side of things, and what do you make of them being coaches? Obviously, I'm sure trying to push Pena's personality a little bit as a champion.
Well, I talked to Julianna Pena, the day that she announced it, and she seems intent on keeping it classy, on not turning this into a total shit show or anything like that. But that being said, I genuinely think that these two are not necessarily each other's favorite person. And anytime you're in a situation like they put them in on TUF, I think you're going to have a clash of personalities. I love that this is who we have as coaches. I love the lineup of the fighters, and I think it's going to be an absolutely fantastic season. But this rematch is going to be, the build up to this rematch is going to be bananas. It's going to be insane.
And what do you make of Nunes? Not like officially leaving American Top Team, but she says she's going to start her own gym and get coaches over and everything like that. What do you make of that move at this stage in her career?
Yeah, normally I'd say it's not a good look when you have a loss and you leave your camp, but I don't think, as she described it, I don't think she's like severing ties and flipping the bird to ATT. I don't think that's the status of it at all. I think she wants an environment where she can make it 100% catered to her. And frankly, we've seen a lot of people have success in doing that. I think a lot of fighters need that at the highest level. And if that's the move that she needs to make to make sure that she stays focused and that she brings the best version of herself to the octagon, absolutely, I support her doing that. And the fact that she still has a good relationship with ATT, I don't think we should read too much into it, honestly.
Can Amanda win the rematch? Some people, there's two schools of thought. Maybe you could have both, right? There's the thought that, Pena has her number, and then there's another thought that Amanda didn't really perform at her highest level that night. Where do you stand on the rematch heading in?
Of course she can win the rematch. Absolutely. I think it's ridiculous if people in one fight, cause that to color your entire career. And, she is the greatest female fighter of all time. You don't take that away after a single loss. And I think that you're going to see a motivated Amanda. You know, the Amanda that fought Chris Cyborg was fighting against an opponent that she knew was capable of beating her. And now she knows that Julianna Pena is capable of beating her. And so I think that we're going to see an Amanda Nunes like what we saw when she fought Chris Cyborg. Now, that being said, on the flip side of it, you've got Julianna Pena, who now knows that she can beat the greatest female fighter in the history of combat sports. And if you want to talk about a confidence booster, not that Julianna Pena ever needed a confidence booster. I love the energy that she brings with her every time she's in the room. It's pretty contagious and inspiring, honestly. So I think we're going to see a different fight. But a different result that remains to be seen for sure.
And then jumping ahead, next month, we've got UFC 272, Covington, Masvidal. It's finally happening. It seemed like this wasn't going to happen. Now it is. Just how excited are you for that fight? The former teammates going at it in the main event.
They released the poster, I think today or yesterday. I'm losing track of time. Oh my gosh. This is the type of fight that like genuinely gets me amped up, gives me the butterflies in my stomach, I guess you can say, because listen, there's competitive rivalry, and we've seen some fantastic competitive rivalries over the years in the UFC. There is competitive rivalry. There's on some level personal hatred, but there's a certain type of hatred that you can only have for someone that you once called a best friend. And this is what we have in this fight. And when that level of deep-seated personal feelings are at stake, this is the type of win. It almost doesn't matter that there's not a belt involved, because this is the type of loss for whoever ends up losing this fight that not only follows you home, it follows you into retirement. This is the type of stuff that whoever loses this fight, in the back of their mind, is going to have to live with for the rest of their life. And so to me, and in some ways, there's more at stake here than a UFC belt.
It looks on paper like Colby, well, and he is the betting favorite heading into this fight. Are people overlooking Masvidal, you think, ahead of this fight?
Of course they are. I mean, and I get why they are, right? Like, his last performance against Kamaru Usman, seeing Jorge get knocked out like that, that's what people remember. And everybody has this recency bias. We all do it to some degree. But I think that people forget, I don't know, Jorge has one of the greatest fight IQs that is not talked about, in my opinion. The guy can make adjustments not only within a fight, not only in between rounds, but literally mid-combination. He's that type of veteran. He's had that many fights, not only inside the octagon, but of course, as we all know, outside of the octagon. He's a fighter's fighter. I'm interested to see, because of the stakes that I just described, whether for the first time we see him. I don't know that he would ever show getting nervous. I don't know that either of them would, but I gotta believe that both of them are going to have a different mentality coming into this fight than they've ever had coming into any other fight. Now, for Jorge, we've seen in his career where when his mentality shifts, he went on a crazy string of victories, and it was literally like he just decided to start winning. I think that it's possible we're going to see the Jorge of old go out there, but you're right. On paper, this is Colby Covington's fight to lose, right? He's got phenomenal wrestling. I think on paper, better wrestling than Jorge, although I think people should not be knocking Jorge's wrestling. When you go back and watch the first Usman fight, I mean, he was doing pretty well against Kamaru Usman. And I think that, I don't know, I think that the striking, I do think I give Jorge a slight edge in the striking. It's really going to come down, in my mind, to who has the better gas tank. It's hard to imagine someone having a better gas tank than Colby Covington, but Jorge Masvidal with a full camp, with motivation, with hatred on his mind, I wouldn't want to mess with him.
Going to make a sharp turn here, only because we have to talk about it. It's all in the news right now. Joe Rogan, just what do you make of what's happening to him right now, and everything that we're seeing in the news?
It's a difficult question on many levels, because I think first and foremost, it's important for me at least, that I am not allowed to have an opinion about what other people should be offended about when the offense has nothing to do with me or my life or my situation. So I want to make very clear that in support of Joe Rogan, I absolutely would not be supporting the things that he said. And that compilation video is awful. But I guess my opinion on the entire situation is formed on the fact that Joe Rogan thinks it's awful. It's not as if Joe Rogan came out and said, made a ton of excuses or said that he stands by, those comments or those things that were said. He came out and made a very, I felt like, heartfelt, genuine apology, not only on that topic, but of course the previous topic about the COVID-19 podcast that he had done about the coronavirus and having various doctors on. I think cancel culture in general is a very dangerous, slippery slope, because the end game of cancel culture is not feasible. We would all love to be able to cut all hatred, all misinformation, all negativity out of the world and have everyone live in a place where we all feel uplifted and positive. But it's impossible to do that. And I think that when you take someone who has done something horribly offensive and they apologize, and you still say, no, you should be silenced from here on out, you take away all opportunity for growth and healing and reconciliation. And that, I feel like, is more than anything what's missing in the world right now. Again, I'm not saying people shouldn't be offended. It's not my place to say. I literally remove myself from that part of the conversation. But I think in terms of the idea of canceling people who in the past have done offensive things, I sure wouldn't want to be judged by my worst day in the office, or I don't think anybody would. And to provide people an opportunity to say, I was wrong, I will do better, and then allow them the chance to do that. Allow them the chance to be better. Allow them the chance to never make that wrong decision again. I think that's what's important, because when we live in a place where you're either with someone or against them, I just don't think it works like that. Life is not black and white. Life is very, very gray. And, we get this all the time, right? Like, I remember when I talked to you about the discussion we had about Khabib making those comments about the ring card girls. I feel like a lot of people want to jump to the conclusion that, like, if you support someone, that means you support everything they ever have or will or want to say or do, which is just not, it's ludicrous, right? I can agree with one thing a person says and disagree with another thing they said. You don't have to take people part and parcel. Life doesn't work like that. It just doesn't. So I think that I think Joe is a good person. I genuinely do. And I think Joe has overall very, very good intentions in terms of the information that he brings forward and the way that he treats people. And every personal interaction with him I've ever had has been 100% positive. But I think more than anything, he's aware that what he did and said was not right, and he's apologized for it. And I think that we should take him at his apology and judge him on his actions, here on out.
Very well said. Kayla Harrison has nothing to do with Joe Rogan. It looks like is. I'm trying to figure out a different segue there, but Kayla Harrison, it appears is staying with PFL. She's all over the posters. I'm assuming, I don't know if it's been officially announced yet, but it looks like she's staying. Did that surprise you a bit? Because and I know obviously Nunes losing, sort of, Dana spoke about this as well, but are you a bit surprised to see her stay with PFL? Because I think a lot of fans want to see that step up in competition.
Yeah, a little bit, and I would love to see this step up in competition for her, but. That being said, Kayla Harrison is going to do what she feels is right for her career. And so I like her as a person. I would love to see her in the UFC as a fan, because I think there's some really, the Nunes matchup is the obvious one. And, maybe after this season, we will see her make a jump to the UFC. I have no idea what her, contract is like over there. So that might not be even a possibility. But I would love to see it. But at the end of the day, if she's happy, then I'm happy for her.
Got to send off this interview with your YouTube channel. You've been doing a great job on it. I've been checking it out, and you're one of the many people that have made that transition. Chael Sonnen was sort of the first. Now we see Bisping and Cormier and all that. What brought you to that decision to start your own channel?
I'm trying. I have for a very long time wanted to, like these conversations we just had, break down fights. I think it's a side of me that people are starting to become more familiar with as I work the desk and as I do commentary. But if I want to make step forward in making myself more of an analyst and less of a reporter, the best way to do that is just to get the information out there on a regular basis. I just didn't have the I bow to people like you who churn and burn these things and do so on a regular basis. I was well aware of how much work it is, and so I needed a partner to be able to help me navigate the getting it out there, the graphics, all of the less glamorous stuff that frankly I'm just not good at, and I don't have enough time for. So when Bet365 approached me and they said, "Hey, we want to partner with you on this channel," I was a little worried that it would become a betting channel because that's not really my forte. Quite often I'm, prevented from making picks, so that makes it kind of awkward for a betting channel. And they said, no, we don't want to make it about betting. We just want to make it about you and, your analysis, interviews, interesting top 10 lists, that type of stuff. So they were the right partner, and away we go. It's a learning process for sure. It's still it'll be a minute before it's what I think it can be, but for now we're just getting stuff out there.
Laura, thank you so much for the time. We're looking forward to the card this Saturday. Just remind people where they can find your YouTube channel and any other things you want to plug. As usual, I'll give you the last word.
Absolutely. The name of the YouTube channel is One on One with Laura Sanko. And you can find me mostly on Instagram at Laura_Sanko. I try to be pretty interactive there. Same handle on Twitter. So appreciate you guys very much. And I do my best to get back to everybody. So hit me up.